Hey there, it's your best friend Kenny here, and today we have another spooky, disturbing story. Before we get started with today's story, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video, and share it. Thank you. Today's story is about a terrifying home invasion in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. Leo Fisher and Sue Duncan were having a quiet evening at home. There was a chicken roasting in the oven, and it was a nice, cozy fall evening. Leo was relaxing in his recliner, lost in a good book. Sue was maybe watching a little bit of TV. Just a regular, quiet night for the couple. The doorbell rang. Leo got up to answer it. He opened the door, and someone pushed in. Before Leo could react, he was tased and fell to the ground. A guy in a long black coat burst in, tied Leo up. The guy started claiming he was with the Virginia SEC and that he was putting Leo under arrest. Before Sue realized it, she was tied up too. The guy's got a black fedora on, black sneakers, and he's flashing what's clearly a fake badge. He starts rambling about drug cartels, and Leo is supposedly putting a hit on somebody. He drags Leo and Sue into their bedroom. He starts interrogating them, asking them about Leo's law firm. He keeps using names that Leo knew from the firm, like this guy knew who he was. This is when Leo realized this was more than just a random home invasion. The guy kept saying that he was interrogating Leo and Sue. He claimed he'd been watching their house and knew their routines. Then the guy asked if he'd fired anyone recently at the law firm. Turns out Leo had just let a young female lawyer go, Alecia Schmuhl. This guy was very interested in that. After about 45 minutes of the interrogation, the guy left the room and made a short phone call. Leo and Sue could hear him talking, yes, no, not yet. He'd come back and say he was talking to his partner or his boss. Time was crawling by as the ordeal continued. The guy dragged Leo into his home office and made him log into his law firm's private network. The guy started going through all of his confidential files and client list, typing away, clearly looking for something. Then the guy starts asking Leo whether he's got any stacks of cash laying around here, like $20,000, maybe $100,000. Leo said, no, don't have any cash. Then he started asking Leo about gold. Leo offered to go to an ATM to get some cash. But the guy just looked at him. Then bam, he tackled Leo, shoved a pillow over his face, and started cutting his throat. Sue called out to Leo, but this time there was no answer. She peeked out and saw a horrifying scene. The man was on top of Leo, slashing and stabbing him. Leo managed to choke out, "He's murdering me!" The man sprang off Leo and turned towards Sue. In his right hand was a pistol. He fired. The bullet grazed Sue's skull, taking a divot out of her scalp. She climbed onto the bed and tried to crawl across it to the phone. Suddenly, the man was on top of her. She felt a knife plunge into her neck. He was stabbing her in her neck, on her back, on her shoulders, over and over. She collapsed. The man got off. When she tried to reach for the phone the second time, the man began stabbing her more. Finally, Sue decided to play dead. The man then walked back over to Leo, who was bleeding on the floor, kicked him and said, "You're going to die." Meanwhile, Sue made it to the other side of the bed, only to find that the man had taken the phone. She reached up and tripped a burglar alarm on the wall, and a siren began bleeding throughout the house. She dragged herself to the office. Another phone was there. "Hello," Sue said to the 911 operator, giving her her address. "Home invasion. Sue Duncan. Leo Fisher. Home invasion. Please come right away. We have 2 cats. Please help them." Leo stumbled towards the front door and fell in the foyer. After laying there for a time, he thought he saw the flashing lights of a police car. He opened the door, went out to the deck, and begged the police to save his wife. Within minutes, backup had arrived. 2 police officers found Sue on the floor of the office, her back against the desk, covered in blood. At first glance, they thought she was dead, but then they could see blood oozing out of her neck to her pulse. The EMT tried to pack the wound, but she kept bleeding through the bandages. Sue kept desperately asking him to make sure her cats were okay. Out on the deck, police officers were attending to Leo, and Leo told them, "I know who did this. Andrew Schmuhl." Andrew was a lawyer too. He went to Marquette University for undergrad. He enlisted in the Army and enrolled in Valparaiso Law School in Indiana. That's where he met Alecia. Andrew and Alecia graduated in 2009 and moved to the Washington, D.C. area. Alecia took a job as an immigration attorney. Andrew joined the Army to become a JAG. However, his career was cut short. One day, during physical training, he slipped on a patch of ice, fell, and suffered a spinal injury. In 2012, he took a medical discharge. By the summer of 2014, Andrew was confined most days in their home in Springfield, Virginia. He collected disability, but was otherwise supported by Alecia, an intellectual property lawyer at a firm called Bean Kinney. Andrew's injury led to him developing an addiction to meds. While Andrew struggled with his meds, Alecia was falling behind at work. She'd been at Bean Kinney for about a year, hired by Leo Fisher. Leo had helped build the firm's reputation while serving as a wildly liked mentor for young attorneys. Alecia began missing meetings and deadlines. Leo partners began performing about her performance. Then, in 2014, Leo learned that Alecia had listed her husband as an employee of the firm on a mortgage application and had impersonated its human resources director in a phone call with the bank. Leo told Alecia that her behavior might constitute fraud. He sent her home without deciding whether or not she'd be fired. The next morning when Leo arrived at work, Andrew was there, uninvited. Surprised, Leo pulled the Schmuhls into his office. Andrew started to get angry, raising his voice, arguing that they weren't trying to commit mortgage fraud. Leo said he needed to talk to Alecia, but Andrew wouldn't let him speak. Finally, Alecia turned to her husband and said, "Andrew, leave now because I want to save my job." He got up and left. Incredibly, Bean Kinney didn't fire Alecia then. But as summer turned into fall, her performance continued to lag. The decision was made to let her go. On October 27th, 2014, Leo handed her a letter for her termination and severance payment. He said he knew Alecia would turn out to be a great lawyer, but it would have to be somewhere else. "Huh?" Andrew replied when she texted him the bad news. Then Andrew said, "Employment attorney stat." Alecia wrote back, "I know, honey." The Schmuhls thought a gender discrimination suit against the firm could be lucrative. Alecia would make more money from a lawsuit than from a severance. The legal discovery process would let her dig into Bean Kinney's finances and its emails, which were probably a gold mine, as Andrew put it. Andrew's problems continued to get worse. He had to be rushed into emergency surgery because of a kidney stone, which ended up making him incontinent. Then an endocrinologist had diagnosed him with low testosterone and prescribed him Clomid, a hormone modulator. Andrew noticed an immediate change in how he felt, a weird disconnected feeling, he would say later. He also began struggling more financially. He began receiving debt collection letters and lawsuits in the mail. Leo told the police that his attacker was Andrew Schmuhl. He'd kept it to himself during the attack, not wanting Andrew to know he'd been recognized, hoping he and his wife would survive. The cops put out an alert for the Schmuhl's Honda SUV. Minutes later, they spotted it. From what they could see inside the car, a woman was driving and a man was in the passenger seat, frantically stripping off his clothes. The chase ended at a strip mall. Suddenly, the man jumped out of the car, completely naked, except for an adult diaper. It was Andrew Schmuhl. The cops had their guns drawn and a police dog ready to go. Andrew surrendered and was cuffed. At first, he seemed normal, but then he started acting strangely. His eyes were rolling back into his head. When they asked if he'd had any drugs, he admitted to taking fentanyl, Dilaudid, and others. They found a fentanyl patch on his arm, but he also had another one hidden under his diaper that wouldn't be discovered until later. Meanwhile, Alecia, who'd been driving, was calmly sitting in a police car. Inside the Honda, the police found all sorts of materials from the torture. A taser, the parts of a handgun, the knife Andrew had used to stab Sue and Leo, credit cards, piles of bloody clothes, tizanidine pills, a novelty police badge, and 2 handwritten notes. One note, later determined to be Alecia's handwriting, contained the directions to Sue and Leo's house. The second note, in Andrew's handwriting, looked like a shopping list. It read, handcuffs, 2 bottles of NyQuil, 2 packs of Benadryl, 1 adult diaper, 2 sleeping masks. EMTs took Andrew to the hospital where he was given an injection of Narcan, a drug used to reverse the effects of opiates. Within minutes, his condition improved. Hospital staff also discovered the fentanyl patch hidden under the diaper and removed it. Meanwhile, Leo Fisher and Sue Duncan were being prepared for emergency surgery to save their lives. Andrew's defense didn't have a lot to work with at trial. They admitted that Andrew was involved, so instead, they centered their defense on whether Andrew was in the right mind at the time that he did this. He originally was going to be tried with his wife, Alecia, but the judge separated their cases. Her lawyers claimed Andrew had been abusive and controlling for years. They said that she was just waiting outside the house during the attack and had no idea what was going on. Andrew's lawyers, of course, denied that. The prosecutors wanted to paint Andrew as a vengeful, greedy, angry monster. Andrew's lawyers, however, argued that his mind had been messed up by the medication that he'd been taking for his chronic pain. They tried to argue that the doctors at the VA had failed him and that his wife, Alecia, had taken advantage of him. Their defense hinged on involuntary intoxication, which is like an insanity defense. But instead of mental illness, it's about being so messed up on drugs that you don't know what you're doing. Andrew's lawyers had hired an expert that was going to testify that Andrew was in a medical-induced delirium that night. Delirium can be caused by drug overdoses, and there are cases of it happening with fentanyl when Andrew was taken. But the judge wouldn't let that evidence in, and the psychiatrist wasn't allowed to use the word delirium or even explain how it could have caused Andrew's actions. Andrew's lawyers established that just 11 days after Alecia lost her job, and 2 days before the attack, that there was security footage of her buying a taser. That same day, she bought NyQuil, Benadryl, and adult diapers. The stuff that was on the shopping list. And Andrew, he had bought 2 burner phones, one named Panama and the other OP. The prosecutors argued, see, they had planned this whole thing. And it looked like they tried to cover their tracks afterwards. There was a gasoline stain on Leo and Sue's rug, like they had tried to burn the house down. Andrew's clothes were soaked in ammonia. The gun was taken apart. And they even snapped the SIM card in one of the burner phones in half. Luckily, the police managed to piece it together to obtain evidence. Near the end of the trial, Andrew himself took the stand in his defense. This is usually a gamble, and a lot of defendants don't testify on their own behalf. Andrew used a cane to walk slowly to the witness stand. His lawyers asked him to list all the drugs he had been taking. Then he asked about the second fentanyl patch they had found under the diaper. Andrew said he had no idea how it got there, and that Alecia was the one who put patches on his back. Then his lawyer asked him what he remembered about the night of the attack. Andrew said his last memory was from earlier that evening when he and Alecia were driving around the Shenandoah Valley. The next thing he remembered, he was waking up in a hospital. He claimed he didn't remember going to Leo and Sue's house for anything, or anything that happened there. The jury deliberated for about a day and then found Andrew guilty. Andrew was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 98 years for the home invasion and the attack. It's a long time. Alecia's trial was supposed to happen later, but she ended up taking a guilty plea to all the charges against her. And she was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Leo and Sue suffered from physical, mental, and emotional problems stemming from the attack. Sue still has problems with her head injury, and her back is constantly aching from the stab wounds. Leo has trouble eating and speaking clearly because of the damage that was done to his throat. Both Leo and Sue have discussed how the home invasion had changed them, how that at night they're constantly afraid. They've talked about how awful of a feeling it was to go through that ordeal. Thank you for watching my video. I'm Kenny, the Spooky Lawyer. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please like and share my video. If you want to be notified when I post new videos, please go ahead and hit the notifications button. I'm typically aiming to upload a video about once a week at this point. You can also find me on my other social media accounts. I'm on X/Twitter, that's at AKBrews. Also on TikTok, again, that's at AKBrews. I have an Instagram, that's Kenny the Spooky Lawyer. And you can see my other social media accounts in the link in my bio. If there is a spooky, disturbing story that you would like me to look into, please send me an email. My email account is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. Thanks. I hope you have a great day and stay spooky.